Hey guys, Michael Corsentino for Shutter Magazine. In this video, I am going to walk you through my workflow for a recent portrait shoot on location at night and walk you step by step through exactly how I approached this sort of thing. Basically, when you're working with ambient and flash, you're dealing with two separate sources of light and you need to control them independently in order to get the best results. And that is what I am going to teach you how to do. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this is the companion video to my February 2017 Shutter Magazine article, which is available digitally online at behindtheshutter.com and also in the print edition, which you can find at Barnes & Noble. So if you want even more free education, be sure and check out all my articles on behindtheshutter.com. All right, so let's dig right in. So here you can see a crop of the full frame image. I always like to do these crops because since I'm lucky enough to be shooting with medium format, you can zoom in really tight and not lose any quality and get a really beautiful result. So here you go. Here's a nice crop. I think this works well as a crop as well, but let's also take a look at the full frame image. And this will give you an idea of the ambient light in the background and the final result with the strobe once the strobe was brought in and how they kind of paired up really well together. All right, so let's peel it back and kind of start at ground zero, as it were. Okay, so first thing is first is finding the location. So I'm always location scouting. I've always got my phone with me and I'm always taking notes and kind of brainstorming new editorials and, you know, finding great locations. So even if you're in a small town like I am, there are great locations that you can find. You just have to kind of keep your eyes open and be on the lookout. And if you are thinking about that, you know, generally you can always find some cool spots. Every town has its little hidden gems. Obviously, if you're in a city, you can't help but, you know, trip over great locations. So city folks have it a little easier, but even small towns have great locations. So always, you know, keep your eyes open, and I am always taking pictures and making notes and kind of, you know, keeping a log of really cool spots and where I might be able to shoot. Okay, so let's talk about the tools that we used for this shoot. You know, obviously, if we're on location, you want to be really light and flexible and agile and be able to, you know, move around quickly. And the minute that you set light stands down, if you're on location, you know, you can run into insurance issues and liability issues. So being able to hand hold the equipment was another important element to this shoot. So that's why I chose to work with this Elinchrom Quadra Ranger. Which is this, right? So the Elinchrom Quadra Ranger is a pack and head system, 400 watt seconds, and it is super light. Because this is not a mono head, all of the controls are in this pack, which gets you use a shoulder sling and it goes over the shoulder of your assistant. And then this light head consequently is extremely lightweight and easy to hand hold or to use on an extension pole, as we were doing here, and I'll get into this in a minute. So modifying that was an Elinchrom 27.5 Rotolux Deep Octa, and this is one of my favorite location light modifiers. It's a great modifier in the studio as well, but especially on location because it is so lightweight and so compact and easy to travel with, and it has just an amazing range of quality of light that you can achieve with it, anything from hard to moderately soft. It's got a silver interior, so it gives you a nice bit of contrast and specularity, but it's not overwhelming and it doesn't hit you over the head. Now, I was using it with the interior baffle, which is inside here, and the exterior diffusion panel to get a nice soft quality of light, but still something that had some contrast to it. It's sort of like a beauty dish in that regard. And then if you wanted it even softer, Elinchrom has something called deflectors, which go over the flash tube inside the softbox to kind of help bounce the light around and make it even softer. Now, I was not using that. It does come with this softbox, but I was not using that in this case. Now, to communicate with and trigger my light from the camera position, I was using the Skyport HS, which is this. Which is a really handy piece of kit. It allows you obviously to control the power for I think up to 4 or 6 groups of light. Anyway, you can definitely do one. I think it's up to 6 groups of light. Don't hold me to that, but you can do at least 4. And I was using this Sekonic L478DR light meter, flash meter, and that is specific to Elechrome. It's got built-in wireless transmission for Elechrome. Now you can get these for different light manufacturers. This one is specifically for Elechrome, and the nice thing about that it allows me to wirelessly trigger the pack and head. When I'm taking meter readings, when I'm when I'm measuring the output from the flash. So that's really handy, rather than having to use pocket wizards or cords or something called weight mode, where you put the meter into a kind of a wait state and then it reads the amount of power when the flash pops. You don't have to do any of that, and those are all kind of clunky workarounds. Wireless is the way to go, if you ask me, when it comes to taking meter readings. Okay, so that's how I measure the light. And I'm going to talk about why that's important and how I use a meter in ambient and flash situations. Okay, so in order to keep everything off the ground and to work with the least amount of liability possible, we use these paint pole in order to hold our light up in the air and to boom it out over our model J. So this is just a shoreline paint pole, and I have a slide that kind of examines this a little bit more closely. And on top of that, you can see here that it's got this screw mount. I'm using this gizmo called a Casey pole adapter, and what that is this nicely machined piece of metal, this little adapter that has a stud at the end of it. So here it's got this screw, female screw mount, and that goes on the end of here, and then this is where your strobe gets mounted on here, right? And these come in 3 different sizes. I use the longest one, and they're great. So that's how we were able to boom the light out over our model. And I have a slide that's going to show you exactly what that looked like. Okay, so that's that. Here's a closer look at this adapter. You can see it here, and you can see how it attaches to the end of the paint pole, which is there. Right? So just a really nice piece of kit. Very useful little gadget, very inexpensive as well. All right, so here is a slide going over why I favor this particular paint pole. I'm giving it to you in all the bare minutia. Okay, this is down and dirty, exactly what I do. But I found this useful when I actually discovered this paint pole in the same way that you guys are, by watching a video about doing the same exact kind of shooting that we're doing here. So what's cool about this shoreline paint pole, extension paint pole, is that it's got a locking button, and it also has these little fixed stops along the way. So it really locks into place, and you're not going to be sliding around at all, which is really nice. And then of course it's got this nicely machined screw end at the top there, and a soft handle so that your model, or rather your assistant, isn't freaking out and stressing out their hands. So it just works really well all together. All right, so let's take a look at how exactly we were using this. Now, I don't have any BTS from my shoot, but a little Google search turned up this image of Joe McNally using the exact same setup that we were using. Here you can see his assistant Drew has the Quadra 400 watt second pack slung over his shoulder, just like my assistant did, and this extension pole here, and the strobe right up there, and then the Rotolux 27.5 deep octa. You can see that there, and it looks like this was used without a diffusion panel on the front. We used the diffusion panels to get a little bit of a softer effect. So that's exactly what we did here, and you can see how easy it is for an assistant to hold this when they were using an extension pole. And so I find that a really great way to work. I work that way often, and it keeps my assistants happy, and it gives you a beautiful quality of light. All right, so the first thing that I did, I want to walk you guys through step by step through exactly what my process is for ambient light shoots, ambient and flash. Because again, you're dealing with 2 independent sources of light, so you have to control them separately and independently in order to get the best results. So my first thing to do is I don't have any flash, turned on. I just need to figure out what the best exposure is going to be for the ambient light. So you can see here that I've got this general ambient light exposure setting, and that's 1600 ISO at 1/15 of a second. At f8. Okay, so it's just finding the balance of what's going to work best for your particular camera and your particular situation. Now, for me, working medium format, I don't really have a really high ISO latitude. I did try 3400, I tried 6400, but those really were not working well. It was just a lot of noise. So opted for f16, or rather for 1600 ISO and f8. Now you might wonder, well, why f8? Why are you stopped down so far? Again, it's a medium format thing because I was not using DSLR. F8 is really like 2 stops wider than that. So, if I were to shoot at f5.6, it would be like shooting at f2.8. So that's why I'm shooting at f8, because I wanted a little bit more depth of field. And I knew that I would, with this ISO and this shutter speed, I could bring in enough ambient, and that, I would have a bit of depth of field, and that I could, get the amount of flash that I needed. Obviously, the smaller aperture that you're using, the more flash power that you're going to need. But since we're at such a high ISO, you're not going to need a lot of flash power in any regard. You're really not going to need much of that anyway. Okay, so I've got this kind of nailed down. I figured out what the overall ambient exposure is. And of course, I'm going to fine tune this once I bring in my subject, and that is kind of my next step. Okay, so once hair and makeup is done, I bring in my model, and obviously we can't see the model because I haven't turned on the flash yet. But again, what I'm doing here is I am double checking everything now that I've shifted my position, and I'm making sure that that initial ambient exposure that I obtained and that I'm working with is still working based on where my subject now is and where I now am. And any background conditions may have changed, etc. So you can see here that you can see Jay's hair just a little bit, and you can see obviously the outline of his body. So that's him, and he's all in silhouette, obviously, because we have not brought in our second source of light, the artificial light, the strobe, and we're going to do that next. But this is the first step, is just to make sure, just to confirm that exposure and make sure that everything is cool. But what we can see is we can see here all the stuff that is lit by ambient light, the fluorescent lights in the background. Now, we didn't have to do this because we weren't shooting directly under the fluorescence, but it's worth noting that if you were shooting under the fluorescence, and this is kind of a topic, that could take up a whole video, but there's a whole range of color temperatures that come from different fluorescent sources. There's not really a standard. There's like a million different kinds of fluorescent, but if you had to sort of give a baseline, advice for shooting under fluorescent, it would be that it's got a green cast. So you want to use, the rule of thumb is basically, a sheet of magenta gel filter, a filter gel for like a Roscoe, 30 points is basically what you're looking for. There is a minus green that you can get in the, Roscoe has a filter pack, and you can get the for correction. It's called the Roscoe correction filter set. And it's got 3 different minus green filters in their versions. It's got, I think, half, quarter, half, and full. And I think full is going to be all the 30 points. So anyway, if you find yourself at night shooting under fluorescent and you're getting a green cast, or you're planning to do that, you really want to make sure that you've got some magenta filtration in your kit, some magenta gel. And I had that ready to go, but we didn't have to use it. Okay, so that is that first step. All right, so next step is going to be bringing in the strobe. And obviously you can see here that the strobe is powered on and we've obtained a good exposure. I'm going to talk about exactly how we're doing that. But that's the second step, is to turn on the flash, get it positioned, and then to take a meter reading. Now what we want with our meter reading, and that's why you guys see here I've got the flash meter. What I want to do with the flash meter is to match the f-stop here, and you're seeing it's 11.3. That's not really what it would have been. In this case, it would have been f8 was what I was looking for. We want to match the exposure from the flash to the ambient, and that is going to give us a nice balanced exposure. So what I would do with the flash meter is I would put it here, and I would have this dome, it's called the lumisphere, facing the strobe, right? Facing out. Now that is going to be what's known as an incident light reading. And what that means is that it is measuring the light that is falling on the subject rather than the light that is being reflected from it. Okay? So why is that important? That is important because an incident reading is much more accurate because it is reading the light that is falling on the subject, not being reflected from it. Different surfaces, different fabrics, different colors reflect light at different intensities. Like a black surface is going to reflect light very differently, with a very different intensity than a white surface. So that's why reflective readings are not as accurate. So I am a big proponent of incident light readings. All right, so that's what we do here. We just take that light reading, we make sure that it matches our ambient. We're looking for f8 on the meter, and obviously these were not my settings either. We were at actually I changed I went from a 15th to a 30th of a second just to give a little bit more. I wanted to have a little bit more stability, because when the mirror slaps on the inside of the camera, it can cause mirror shake. So I wanted a little bit faster shutter speed, but not too fast. So it was 1/130th, and I'll have another slide for you that goes over that. And the ISO was 1600. So let's take a look at that next slide, and it'll become a little bit more clear. Okay, so final exposure for this image, as I just said, was 1600 ISO, 1/130th of a second. I went up a stop at f8. Okay. So that would have been reflected here. This is just a product shot that I found online, so all of that is incorrect. So what I would be looking for here is f8. And that is going to give me a really solid exposure. All right, then what I'm doing there is I'm reading, again, I am reading the light from the flash, from the strobe. All right, it does not affect in any way what's going on here with the ambient light. Again, we've got two different sources of light happening. We've got ambient, and then we've got artificial, the flash, right? So this is going to give me a great starting point, if not, the end point. I may need to noodle this a little bit. I really didn't have to do much of that here. It was pretty spot on right out of the gate, and we got what I think is a lovely result. Okay, so let's show you the lighting diagram. Again, could not be more simple. You can see here that we've got the light positioned off to the side, camera right, just one light with a simple lightweight modifier, 400 watt second light, and I really did not have to use a lot of power on this. I had dialed it all the way down. It was in the A port, which gives you more power than the B port, but still in all, I had it powered all the way down. We're using a really fairly high ISO for use with flash. So we didn't have to use a lot of power. And one of the nice things about that is that when we're using really low amounts of power, our strobe is going to recycle much more quickly. We're demanding a lot less from the battery, so the battery is going to last a lot longer, and you can literally get hundreds of pops with some of the more some of the most current battery operated strobes out there. If you're working at really low power, you're going to get a lot more mileage than when you're working at half or even full power, right? So that's what that's about. And you can see here, you guys know my work if you follow this channel and you follow my stuff, and you know that I like to have some direction to my light because it creates shadow and it creates modeling. And you can see here that we've got all that stuff going on here. The light has direction. It's coming from here. It's not coming from dead center. So that's why we have, a really interesting looking quality of light rather than this boring kind of flat lighting, all this shadow. And it just creates drama. And, if you're not doing that, if you're not positioning your lights from the side, I encourage you to try it. Don't be afraid of shadow. You can always pop in a reflector over here if you wanted to open some of that up, but I didn't find it necessary to do that here. All right, let's talk a little bit about post-processing. So in post, for here on the left, you can see here the image straight out of camera, and you can see that there's no color grading applied. And on the right, you can see that color grading has been applied. So I mentioned in the article, never underestimate the value and the impact of color grading, because it can do a tremendous amount when it comes to giving your images, a feeling and a mood, right? And that's really what I was going for here. So I always want my color grading to just support the image and the creative direction for the piece, and not to overpower, not to overwhelm, and not to get in the way, not to be obtrusive. I don't want someone to look at the image and say, oh yeah, that's a very effects-driven kind of image. I don't even want it, like if you didn't see them next to each other, you wouldn't even really think about that. You would just say, oh, that's a cool image. And that's really what I want. For me, when I look at it, that's what I'm looking for when I'm doing this is I like to say, oh wow, that looks cool, and then I know, and then I kind of experiment and work with that. And you can do this in Lightroom. You can do it in Capture One. I did this in Capture One because that's the raw processor that I use. It's a phenomenal tool. If you haven't, experimented with it or checked it out, you can download a free trial. So I definitely recommend that you check that out. You can use it with DSLR. You can use it with medium format. It's a wonderful raw processor. It's got some very, very powerful tools in it. But of course, you absolutely can do this in Lightroom, and you can do it in Photoshop as well. And there are all sorts of presets as well. You can use actions. There's just any number of things that you can do to add some mood and drama with color to your images. So definitely check out color grading because it can do a lot. It can go a long way towards helping get the most out of your images. All right. So this is a little off topic when it comes to lighting, but I get this question all the time. Where do I find models and assistants to work with to help me make my shoots great? And I think all photographers struggle with this when it comes when we're building our books, when we're doing personal projects. We all want to work with fresh faces, and we all could use a hand with assistants. I've tried Model Mayhem. I've tried One Model Place back in the day, both of those, and they always ended up kind of being a disappointment with people flaking and not showing up. For me, what I found works really well is posting on Facebook in local, regional groups that are specific to photographers and models and actors. Even here in Orlando, which is not a major market, I've still got a couple of really great resources on Facebook that I post in regularly. Always putting new work up and just giving a shout out to the people that I'm working with. And I always find new people that way. People see the work and they get excited and they want to work with you. So here are just two examples of two that I post with regularly. This is Orlando Models and Castings. And then there's Orlando Meet and Greet, and that's for photographers. And there's some models in there and talent agencies as well. And of course, I have agency relationships, and then I've got people, creative team members that I work with, hair and makeup, and stylists, etc., who they know people, and those people know people. So it kind of networks that way. But Facebook is a great resource, so I definitely encourage you to check it out if you're kind of stuck when it comes to finding people to work with. All right, so we're going to close things out with just another look at the overall full frame image, and then take a look at the crop, and there you go. So again, if you want even more amazing free education, I encourage you to check out all my articles over at behindtheshutter.com. There's great stuff there, and I will see you next month here at behindtheshutter.com.